through this process. So I don't know how many new insights I'm going to give you today, but I'm pleased to have you here, and it would be great for you to also provide feedback on your experience. But let me just open my presentation quickly. So I'm just going to get my PowerPoint. Well, I'm pleased you're here because it does mean we can have some dialogue about the publishing process and with you having been through it already. So
Alex,
yes.
can I introduce first and then I give the time for you, perhaps only 5 minutes and then
Perfect.
can begin.
Thanks, Najib. Go for it.
Okay, good morning everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are glad to be able to meet here, some offline in the hotel and some through Zoom. As mentioned by Alex, that there is a change, and we know all that there is a change within research institution in Indonesia, and LIPI is no longer exists, and now we all move into BRIN, National Research and Innovation Agency, and Alex, perhaps you already aware of that one. And one of the responsibility, one of the purpose of the establishment of BRIN is upgrading ourselves, upgrading our research institute into more globally involved with academic community in foreign countries. And one of them is by speeding up or accelerating our publication, our international publication. That's why we invite you to come here to give up perhaps the method, the route, and then also the mechanism of how we publish our work, our research. And as mentioned in our communication, that we actually aware that there is collaboration between Springer and LIPI Press, or now BRIN Press. I don't know, is that the correct name? I think the BRIN Press, right? But at our Institute of Social Sciences and Humanities, we would like to do more active and accelerate our publication by collaborating individually or institutionally with Springer. At BRIN Press or LIPI Press, usually we were more passive. I mean, waiting for Springer and LIPI Press to pick up which of our books that will be translated into English and when published by Springer. And that's all depend on our our work that already published by LIPI Press. Now here, I think we have a new route, a new method in terms of what you call it, the way to publish our research. It means like what you call it, by proposing, by submitting proposals to Springer, and perhaps the work itself or the research itself is still in progress, but we can prepare that research, the output of that research, to be published at the end, perhaps by Springer. And at this time, actually, we intend to submit at least 10 proposals, edited volume, not monograph, but perhaps next time we would like to submit, to invite several researchers at BRIN that already finished their PhD or master, and then working to submit their work into what you call it, like monograph or into book. But that just pop up in my mind after receiving your email, Alex. So right now, perhaps we will focus on edited volume. Although perhaps if like Teh Tina would like to submit a monograph or other participant here would like to submit a monograph based on their dissertation, I think that's okay too. So currently we have here at Zoom 16 people, but a few other participants joining directly from the hotel. And we have 2 days workshop, and hopefully tomorrow all the proposal will be ready and can be submitted, will be reviewed by Alex or then submitted into Springer publication. I think that's short note from me. And I think I would like now to invite you, Alex, to begin your presentation, and then followed by Q&A. Time is yours.
Perfect. Thanks, Najib. Thank you very much. And I just wanted to say that these kind of workshops, while we didn't have, a great deal of time to sort of plan something very detailed from our side, basically what I want to do is just give an overview of the publishing process and then leave you as a collective to discuss your proposals, submit the proposals at the end of the workshop, and then I will be able to provide feedback on those proposals ahead of deciding which ones to take forward to peer review. So yeah, these workshops are really the ideal platform to brainstorm for edited volumes. So I think the concept is edited volumes stemming from symposiums always tend to work well. So I'm pleased that this is that Bryn is participating in this kind of workshop. In the long term, I'd also like to suggest that we perhaps look at doing, well, hopefully in person, pending changes within the pandemic, to try and do a forum on publishing in Indonesia, and then also join with some of our Indonesian partners. We have a co-publishing partnership, as I mentioned, with Bryn Press, OBOR, UGM Press, and we're publishing quite a lot of work from Universitas Indonesia as well. So I think it would be really fantastic, pending changes within the circumstances, to organize a more hands-on event with other Indonesian partners next year. So hopefully that's a conversation we can keep going. But without further ado, I'm going to run through, again, like I said, for some of you here, this is going to be, well, existing knowledge in terms of how the Springer publishing process works. But for those of you that haven't published with us and are wanting to understand our process, we'll be giving an overview on that. So let me share my screen. 1 second. Okay. Sorry, 1 second. I'm just looking for show all windows. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Great. Everyone see my first slide? Yes. Okay. So I should introduce myself as well, in terms of my background and my time at Springer. I am based in Singapore. I used to come to Jakarta frequently prior to the pandemic. So I'm hoping by next year I'll have the opportunity to return. But I'm the commissioning editor handling Southeast and East Asia, and I'm working across the humanities and social sciences. So it's a very broad interdisciplinary program. It's a growing program. I publish around 60 books a year within my list. And yes, there's certainly an interest in producing more work coming from Indonesia. So this led to us establishing a partnership in 2016 between, okay, I'm sorry, this is the old logo, which I know now needs to be updated to Bryn, but between Lippi and Springer, a co-publishing partnership was established under IKAPI, the Indonesian Publishers Association, with 4 Indonesian publishers who I've already mentioned: UGM Press, Lippi, OBOR, and previously Rosda. They no longer working with us, but the other 3, and including now Bryn Press, still working with us together. So the aim of that relationship was, of course, to look at doing translations from Bahasa Indonesia into English, but that has since developed that we also co-publishing books from Indonesia that are originally published in Bahasa by an Indonesian press. And then what we're doing is publishing it to an international market. So in the cases of original English language works that are published, say, by Bryn Press, those books are, the licensing for the Indonesian market is retained by Bryn Press, and Springer takes the international rights for distribution for the co-published edition. So this is an outdated slide because, again, we didn't have much time in giving the overview of the publications from Bryn Press, but these were the first 2 titles that published. Obviously, Lydia, you're here. Atika, saw you there as well. Nanto, I think you're on the call as well. So I'm glad I get to do a quick plug for your books, which have been published. But since these first 2 books were published, we've also published another 6 books. 4 of which have been released and 2 in production. So yeah, Bryn Press has been particularly active in their co-publishing partnership. We've also tried to organize a range of events such as this one we're having today with Lippy and with Springer. This was a forum that we, this was the advertising of the forum that we organized. We participated in the Indonesian Science Expo at the end of 2018. We also had, I don't have photos from this event, but we had a very large forum with Lippy and Lippy Press in June 2019. So we are always looking to have forums on publishing and the publishing process with Lippy to discuss how the publishing process works and what we're really looking for in book proposals. So this was following the renewal of the co-publish agreement with Lippy Press, now Bryn Press, in 2019 to 2022. So these were the titles that were identified. I know Kunyawati, her book has now currently been signed and is going to be going into production quite soon as a translation. So yeah, some photos of the events that we had before the pandemic at the Indonesian Science Fair when we renewed that co-publishing agreement. And of course, I want to highlight that co-publishing agreement that exists between Bryn Press and Springer because, of course, it's a logical avenue for those of you who are working in both Bahasa and in English. By the same token, if we wanted to do, say, translate the edited volumes that you are working on today into Bahasa, do it the other way around, and then offer that Bahasa language translation to Bryn Press, that is also possible under the terms of our agreement. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the book publishing process. And again, I know that this is, again, old news for some of you, but this was a graphic that was commissioned by Springer in 2018, which really beautifully illustrates the publication process and just how much work goes into it. So of course, you as researchers are the gardeners on the top level, and us as the publishers are in the bottom blue level. So we're working behind the scenes from the moment the proposal is received, sending it through peer review, coordinating that feedback, working on the manuscript development, sending it into production, the copy editing, typesetting, etc. And the process doesn't end once it's published. We then have communications and publicity who work on publishing, on publicizing the book and making sure it finds its way to the widest authorship possible. I also want to quickly touch on the way Springer's publishing model works, because I think in Indonesia and other parts of this region, there's still a strong orientation towards print and print sales. However, the sort of key aspect of Springer's publishing model is its ebook collections, which we sell on a subscription basis to university and institutional libraries. So we still do print books and we publish them on a print on demand basis. It's no longer the way publishing used to work when you would have a print run. Sorry, someone's mic's on. I don't know if it's possible to turn off, to mute. Anyway, yeah, just to make you aware, there's a bit of background noise there. So yeah, the way it used to work with print runs is no longer the way. As a book is ordered, we print it and ship it. So the primary readership is coming through ebooks, and that's really important to be aware of, and through the ebook collections. So it's also important to understand the way our branding is structured. In 2015, we underwent a merger and Springer Nature was formed. So sometimes there is a little bit of confusion of Springer Nature and how that all ties together. I as in my program, I'm only commissioning under the Springer brand, but I'm part of Springer Nature in terms of the umbrella organization. And we have several imprints within that structure, the other of which is Palgrave Macmillan. So Palgrave Macmillan, of course, is a major humanities and social sciences imprint. And it does mean that, if you are perhaps working in a discipline like history, it may mean that your book may be a stronger fit for Palgrave. So Springer tends to be stronger in specific disciplines within the HSS portfolio, as does Palgrave. So in some cases, I might get a proposal and say, I think this might be a better fit to the Palgrave imprint rather than the Springer imprint, and then connect you with the relevant editor. So just to be aware of that. So again, within our brands, we have more than 175 years of publishing experience. Springer specifically was funded in Germany by Julius Springer in 1842. So we're going on now to 179 years. So it's a long-standing legacy. Everybody asks if we're still based in Germany. We still have a headquarters in Berlin, but we're a truly global publisher now. So our Asia Pacific headquarters is here in Singapore, where I'm based. Within the social sciences, we have a really significant portfolio within HSS, and within the social sciences specifically, we have more than 16,000 books, more than 128 journals, and more than 1,000 book series. And I'm going to be touching quickly on the difference between publishing standalone books and series. We're the largest academic book publisher in the world in terms of volume, and we're really publishing across disciplines, and we're also publishing a lot of interdisciplinary work. We publish around 13,000 new books every year across STEM and HSS, as well as business and economics. We have more than 300,000 books on our online platforms. And again, as I mentioned earlier, it's really important to realize that the shift to digital was a very important part of Springer's strategy, was to make sure that all our books are available digitally. All books that have been published within the sort of 179 years of Springer's legacy are now available online. And we were the first publisher to offer all books in electronic formats. So again, alongside the print version, as I mentioned, but it's really important to be aware of the fact that we are strongly pushing our e-publishing. So I just want to quickly touch on types of books, which I think many of you here know already. And again, I wasn't sure if we might have some PhDs who might be in the audience today. So I wanted to also just give an update on what types of books you can look to publish. I know everybody is focusing on edited volumes today, so I will speak more specifically to what we look for in edited volumes. But within my program, I'm publishing predominantly edited volumes first, and also monographs, but I also publish reference works. I publish several book series, and increasingly publishing proceedings. So previously within the humanities and social sciences lists, we didn't do many proceedings. However, that is changing. So if you are organizing any conferences that you feel might be a fit for a proceedings volume, we will now consider proceedings proposals. There are requirements, one of which is we want strong regional or international presenters. So it shouldn't all be it shouldn't be a very localized conference. We would ideally have at least 30 to 40% regional or international contributors. So yeah, again, our proceedings publications are growing in HSS, but I will always favor an edited volume over proceedings. For obvious reasons. The first is that edited volumes speak to a specific theme. There needs to be a clear line of a clear through line between the chapters, and they need to have the cohesion. I think is the greatest challenge in producing an edited volume. Often edited volume proposals are rejected because of that lack of cohesion. The chapters have no clear connects between one another. The organization within the section organizations is not very clear. And it's very obvious to both the publisher and the reviewer reviewers when an edited volume has just taken disparate papers and tried to put them together. So while you're working on your proposals today, I want you to think very carefully about that. Maybe you've got a paper that you're looking to feed into this volume, but it may require substantial rewriting to ensure that there's a communication between those chapters. So I think as contributing authors to an edited volume, it's really important to stay in dialogue with one another in terms of, obviously your research is focusing on different things, but within that collection, there needs to be that common through line, and in order to enable cohesion within the volume. It's also very important. That's why the role of the volume editor or volume editors is so crucial, because the volume editors are essentially responsible for ensuring that there is that connectivity between the chapters. So in that sense, I think edited volumes are a much more difficult undertaking in terms of a volume editor's responsibility than a monograph. Because obviously in a monograph, that through line is guaranteed because there's usually one or just two voices. When you have multiple voices, as they say, too many cooks in the kitchen, it's important that they're all working together to make sure that's, yeah, the dinner is going to be from within the same, how would we say, same cuisine tradition. So it's, yeah, really important that you have that conversation in terms of how your chapters are going to speak to one another. As I've already mentioned, I am also interested in monographs. So monographs and edited volumes are the two primary book types I publish. So if anyone here is working on a monograph, please, get in touch. The proposal process is the same for both monographs and edited volumes, although we will look more closely at the table of contents in edited volumes. And in case of monographs, we are we usually would want at least a sample chapter or two from the monograph. The same for edited volumes usually applies, so we do ask for a sample chapters, usually the introduction. The word count for monographs and edited volumes tends to be in the same ballpark. We're looking at 110,000 words as a preferred length. However, I will consider proposals anywhere from 60,000 words for monographs, 80,000 words and up for edited volumes. A common question then is, how long should chapters be within that word count? And that's really up to you, as the author and as the volume editor, to discuss what the preferred word count is for the chapter itself, depending on the number of chapters. But I would certainly say that a chapter shouldn't be less than 6,000 words. So I'd say between 6,000 to 10,000 words is an average length for a book chapter. I'd also like to highlight book series, because Springer publishes in both book series and standalone volumes. And as I've already mentioned, under co-publishing frameworks. So there are advantages to what we call cross-feeding into a book series. Book series typically will publish both edited volumes and monographs. Some also publish proceedings. But the advantage of publishing in a book series has the same kind of benefits that you would find for publishing in a journal in terms of indexation. So after 3 years, we would usually send a series out to Scopus or Web of Science to be evaluated. It's quite a long and detailed process. And if the series isn't accepted in Scopus, as I know Scopus indexation is very important in Indonesia and other parts of this region, all books that are published within the series are automatically then indexed in the same avenues as where the series is. In the case of standalone books, because this is a very common question, will my book be indexed in Scopus? There's no way for us to guarantee that. So we send all books that we publish out to Scopus, but then it's up to Scopus on whether they accept that book for indexing. So just to be aware of that. Within book series, also the peer review structure is slightly different. In the case of standalone volumes, Springer coordinates the entire review process on our side externally. In the case of book series, that review process is coordinated by the series editors and the editorial board. We also send it out for external review, but it will be one internal review from the series and one external review coordinated by the publisher. I also wanted to quickly touch on this book type, which is called a Springer brief. We are not publishing as many Springer briefs anymore. And certainly in my list, I'm not doing so many short form books anymore. The reason being that we found that the shorter form books don't perform as well as the longer form standalone titles. But that being said, this is still an option that can be considered. It's not for edited volumes, so I don't know if it would be relevant. Well, it's not as relevant a book type given the focus of today's workshop, but for shorter monographs or case studies, in-depth case studies, or a snapshot of a hot or emerging topic, this is still a book type that can be considered, and it's the word count has actually changed. It's anywhere between 20 to 50,000 words. So this is a nice book that's sort of a side jump between, well, it's not quite a full-length monograph, but it's not a journal article. So it's a nice way to kind of take one step up from the journal article without taking on the task of a full-length monograph. It's always published in soft cover, and they always fed into disciplinary series. So we will have Springer Brief series in linguistics and anthropology and public health and development studies, etc. But again, I'm not publishing so many of these book types, but they are still that we are still publishing, but we have to make a much stronger case now for taking on a Springer Brief. Major reference works, of course, a very important part of our program. So these are flagship titles, and they have extremely high numbers of downloads and citations. They're always led by very senior scholars in their fields. It contains peer-reviewed content by invited experts, and it's always an overview of tertiary literature. So their focus is always quite broad and upward of 1,000 pages minimum. These books take about 2 to 3 years to develop. So it's quite a process, but if you are interested in taking on the enormous task of editing a major reference work, or handbooks are included as major reference works, then by all means, please get in touch with me. So now I just want to quickly outline the steps for getting published and what we're really looking for as a publisher. The first step is we want something cutting edge, and we're after something original. A lot of questions I get are, can I pull together my different journal articles, or take a team of authors such as yourselves today, and can we all take articles that we've published and mash them together and publish a book? And the answer is no. We have a 90% originality preference for work. We do accept some previously published work, which is subject to the clearance of the original publisher. And that clearance needs to be obtained for both print sales and ebook sales. So if you have a paper, for example, if you're writing a monograph and you've got a paper that you've published in a journal, you want to include that paper word for word as it stands in your monograph, you will need to then get the permission from the original publisher. So just to be aware of that, because it is a really common inquiry to put together existing work. We really look, we also understand that book chapters will often be developed from existing work that's already out there, that's already been published, but then we're really expecting that that research is reframed and completely rewritten and cited back to the original publication. So we're looking for a strong theoretical grounding in the literature. We're looking for books that have, and this is important, international or regional appeal, a clear sense of the markets, a clear sense of understanding of the readership. Who is your book going to be targeting? Is it targeting students as a textbook, as a teaching resource? That is going to be very different from a scholarly edited volume or monograph, which is going to be targeting researchers or graduate students. So be very clear on that in the proposal. I've already sent the proposal form to Najib, and maybe what I can do before I leave the session is to quickly open that form, and we can quickly run through it so you can see what is required. It's also important to, in many cases, when you're working in a second language, it's good to have someone who's a native speaker or a proofreader just give it a read before you send it out. Yeah, again, I know that, say, Lippy Press, now Brim Press, they do offer a lot of copy editing support, which is another benefit of considering co-publication. In the proposal, we also want to see that, yeah, as I've mentioned, there is a connect with a clear audience and a very well-defined sense of that literature in the field. So it's fine and well to put together a great edited volume or a monograph proposal, but perhaps it's covering the exact same territory of something that was published by Routledge 6 months ago. So it's really important that you also define in what ways this edited volume is going to be unique, what it's going to contribute to the existing literature, and why there will be a market for this book. That's really crucial. So what I usually suggest volume editors or authors to do in the marketing text section of the proposal is to highlight those books which are most closely related to the book you're proposing, and then to also give an overview, just a short paragraph on why you think your book is unique and what is going to present that's novel and or build upon that which has gone before it. So as I mentioned, I always recommend including a sample chapter, preferably the introduction, and if possible, one extra book. The introduction in an edited volume makes a lot of sense from where I sit, because it allows and a preface perhaps from the edited volume, the volume editors, it allows you to demarcate what the aim of this collection is and how those chapters, as I mentioned earlier, are all tied together. So this is the publishing process in terms of how it unfolds. Today, you're in phase 1 of this process, or what should I say, phase 1 and phase 2. You already have some topics for edited volumes that you're looking to compile, and you're in the process of writing this proposal and sending it to Springer. Once your proposal is completed, and again, I'll touch on the proposal form at the end of this in terms of what is needed, but the proposal then goes out for review. It goes out for 2 rounds of single blind external review. We do invite volume editors and authors to submit a list of recommended reviewers. So we always take those recommendations into account. Once the 2 reports come back, there is a final question at the end of the reviewer report, which asks whether the scholar recommends publication or not. And usually we will either get a recommendation with substantial revision, recommendation with minor revision, or rejection. If we have a bipolar review where there's 1 rejection but 1 recommendation, we will send it out for a 3rd review. So we understand that sometimes reviewers and authors will not always see eye to eye, and the process, if there is some substantial criticism, providing the author can also defend their position if they strongly disagree with the reviewer said, again, we can always consult an additional reviewer for a 3rd opinion. But the aim of having the review at this early stage before the manuscript is completed is to flag potential issues in the manuscript's development. And that's why we need a really well-defined table of contents. In the case of an edited volume, what I would suggest once you've completed the proposal is to really focus on the table of contents and the abstracts, and then, as I said, the synopsis or a preface, which explains how these chapters will all hang together. This is going to be the most common criticism coming from a reviewer when it comes to looking at an edited volume proposal. Disparate chapters, that's the most common set of feedback. We've had cases where we've had, and like I say, as much as a symposium or a workshop is a great platform for, developing an edited volume, it usually works best when it's coming from a conference that has a very specific theme. So maybe it's looking at the Confucianism Society in China, and they're all looking at various studies relating to Confucius. Then there's an automatic through line in terms of chapters. So I just want to caution you against trying to do calls for chapters at conferences or symposiums which have a very broad theme, because it often works out that the chapters just don't tie together. When I worked with, hopefully at some point, Najib, we can have Getty join us for another session, and she has a lot of experience with this. Getty Tambunan is in the Faculty of Humanities at Universitas Indonesia, and we've been working with them for the last 3 years on producing edited volumes. And she's learned we've learned along the way how important that cohesion is in edited volume proposals, because if you look at the first set of proposals that UI put forward, we had overwhelming numbers of rejections because of this issue, that you'd had a workshop and all the chapters were kind of just bunged together as papers and the reviewers rejected them. There's a substantial amount of, like I say, rewriting that needs to go in, and selectivity is really important. I've said to the UI team in the publications office, I would rather have a shorter, more defined edited volume of 60, 70,000 words than a longer, chunkier 120, 150,000 word edited volume with weak chapters. So it's also important, as if you're going to be a volume editor, to be quite cutthroat there, act like a journal editor. Those chapters that just don't fit, it might be good work, but perhaps it doesn't fit the aims of what the edited volume is setting out to achieve. It's better then to direct that author to seeking an alternative publication outlet, such as a journal. No hard feelings on that. Again, it's all to do with how that edited volume is ultimately packaged. We then issue a contract. If everything goes ahead, the contract is issued. Kurniawati has just been through this process. It's signed digitally, and then we allow the authors and the editors to work on the timeline. The contract does stipulate a deadline for submitting the manuscript. That's ahead of the next round of peer review. So I encourage authors and editors to be generous with that time. We don't hold you to any specific timeline. You set your own timeline for the time that you need. Yeah. I had a question.
No.
No. Sorry. I just heard an echo. Okay, I'll carry on. How are we doing with time? Let me just have a look. Okay, great. So yes, the deadline is set by the authors. So you need to give yourself the time you need to get the manuscript together. Once the manuscript is submitted, again, it goes through peer review. Sometimes one review, if the reviews have been overwhelmingly positive at the proposal stage, we might only do one review. As I mentioned, for series, we will then also send the manuscript to the series editor and the board, but usually there are 2 reviews. That also then gives you the chance for further improvements. And as I mentioned, the reason we have the 2 separate rounds of review at proposal and at manuscript stage is to give you as much feedback as possible on improving the work and to getting the work to where it needs to be. Once the final manuscript is submitted, it goes into production. And in the case of the standard edited volume production timeline, it's about 4 months. Then it's published in ebook and in print. For the shorter books I mentioned previously, the Springer briefs, that's very fast. It's about 2 to 3 months. So if you are looking to do a fast publication or fast publication track, that is an option. I've already outlined these timelines, and yeah, it basically just gives an overview of how much time you can expect. I should add that with the pandemic, these timelines have actually tended to be quite a lot longer because everybody's under so much pressure working from home with family, etc. But I aim to send reports within 8 to 12 weeks. Doesn't always work out that way, but that's certainly what we aim for. Again, I just want to touch on some of the points I think you should consider today when you're developing your edited volume proposals. Consider the regional versus international focus. One point to note that's really important, and this often happens when we have, like, say, workshops or symposiums that are concentrated within a specific institution. It's very important to invite external scholars. In the case of, say, LIPI or BRIN, because it's coming from the Institute through the co-publishing partner, it has been that we've only really included chapters from LIPI researchers in those cases. And again, it's not unheard of. It's not unheard of to have a volume that is within the purview of the institute from which it's coming. But generally, it is preferred to always invite outside scholars to contribute. So in the case of edited volumes, it's also good to have 2 editors, perhaps from different countries, different institutes, which lead greater credence to the volume. So just something to think about. If you are looking to plan an edited volume from a conference in the future, it's good to think about, you know, the balance of regional or international representation within a volume. If you're speaking to a very specific topic on Indonesia, of course, we absolutely support having predominantly Indonesia-based researchers. So, but again, it can be helpful to have 1 or 2 contributors who are focused on Indonesia coming from other parts of the world or from other institutes. Again, not necessarily other parts of the world so much as other institutes. So it's always, that's why I think maybe next year we should look at doing some kind of forum or workshop where we can partner different Indonesian institutes and publishers together to also expand the dialogue between those institutes and co-publishing partners. Again, focus is something that's quite important. Springer is not afraid of publishing work that other smaller presses might consider quite niche. So if your research is focusing on Flores specifically in Indonesia, we're not going to be scared of publishing that has a very defined focus. But again, we still need to be there still needs to be a sense of the readership of that volume. So even if it is focused on studying urbanization in Jakarta and Bandung, as an example, it needs to have a clear sense of why that study or why that research is going to be relevant to other studies of urbanization, perhaps in developing countries, or conversations around urbanization in big cities and other parts of Southeast Asia. So again, think about the positionality of your work within a broader readership and how to ensure that what you're producing is going to also reach beyond that very specific community that you're perhaps focused on. Again, these are the supporting documents we will need. So following the preparation of the proposal form, we're going to need the CVs of the editors, not the authors, the chapter authors. That's not required. It can be helpful, though, to just include a list of bios from each contributing author. So that's something that you might want to put together. As I mentioned, table of contents. I think that's what the proposal form will follow once the table of contents is developed. So I would start with the table of contents and how that's all going to work together. I would usually want around 200 words, maybe even a bit longer, 300 to 400 words per abstract per chapter. And again, a sample chapter or an introduction, the introduction would be ideal. I quickly want to touch on search engine optimization, or SEO for short, and that is to lay particular importance on keywords. And this is also really important for journal publishing because Google only shows the first 55 characters, including spaces, of abstracts or any section of information. So your title, and I think Kurniawati, we could chat later, but I think we changed your title from the original.
Yeah.
And yes, we did, right?
Yeah. I add something subtitle. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we follow your suggestion because that's good.
Thank you. Remind me, the revised title is, can you remember offhand? I can pull it up just now. Gender in Indonesia, I forget the specifics. I'll pull it up at the end of the session. But that's a very good example of how we took the original title, which I don't think had Indonesia in it, because of course it was published by Britain Press or Lippi Press for an Indonesian market in Bahasa. So it was kind of implied, but in the case of positioning it for the international markets, it's very important that the country or the region is always mentioned in a title. We've done data analysis that proves this, that books and journal articles that have the country or region mentioned in the title tend to obtain higher readership. And the way to think about it is quite simply what you type into your database when you're looking for work, when you're looking for research. So you're not just going to type in gender. No, you will type in gender, Indonesia, sexism, politics, depending on what the focus is. So you want to think of what a researcher is going to be typing into the database when they're looking for work like yours, and then put that into the title. So I always recommend having a main title and a subtitle. And the reason for that is Google's 55 characters. Get as many keywords in as you can. So the main title should really, like I say, always have the country or the region and the main focus, and then the subtitle supports that. Maybe you're working within a particular theoretical framework that you want to mention. And like I say, we don't always have subtitles, but I do recommend including them. So I have a whole little guidebook on search engine optimization and how to write for SEO purposes. But I also want you to think about this with your chapter abstracts that you're going to be doing today, is those first 2 lines of your abstract need to sum it up as succinctly as possible. There's a wonderful 3-minute thesis competition. I'm not sure if anyone is familiar with that. It's run by universities globally, but it's basically an opportunity for doctoral students to present the nuts and bolts of their research in 3 minutes. Think of it in the same terms when you're writing an abstract. Okay, what would you say in 3 minutes about your chapter? We also have the option in edited volumes of including the abstracts at the top of the chapter. This is optional. You don't have to do it, but I always recommend including the abstract at the start of the chapter because of, again, search engine optimization, because the important bits, you might start your chapter with a story, and Google's not going to pick up those 55 characters are not then going to capture your research, meaning it's got less chance of being discovered. So always include the abstract and the keywords, even though they're optional. At Springer, I always say, yes, go for that option. Okay, also think of synonyms and related words when you are crafting keywords. Going to quickly touch on some do's and don'ts. Right, I took this actually from the Lippy presentation that I did previously, and that is always research the publisher's list. I often get inquiries, someone wants to do a trade book and they've clearly approached 10 publishers simultaneously and not really shown an awareness of what Springer's list publishes. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we've also got Palgrave Macmillan, we've got Macmillan Education. Maybe your book is going to be a stronger fit for Palgrave's list. So within the marketing text, the market analysis that I mentioned earlier in the proposal form, it's not only about giving an overview of competing publishers' work, but also work that is published within Springer's list and perhaps from a sister imprint like Palgrave. So show an awareness of what we're also publishing, and that there's going to be no cannibalization between your book and another book that we've already published. Proofread your proposal, and I'm going to touch on the PhD thesis, but I don't think we have any PhDs here, so I'll be quick with that. Don't submit your proposal to numerous editors, only submit to the most appropriate editor. Be clear, focus on keywords, as I've mentioned, with search engine optimization. Don't be abstract. There's a tendency in the humanities, I think, particularly for us to come up with these really creative, fluffy titles. I always use the example of The Great Derangement by Amitav Ghosh, which is about climate change. It's fine if you're Amitav Ghosh, but for the rest of us, it's better to say climate change in Southeast Asia, policy, investigations of policy and practice. Right. So yeah, don't have something that's too abstract, or it's good to be creative, but again, keywords. Don't expect to be able to change your title at the last minute. We actually announce the titles that we're going to be publishing to the markets in advance as part of our marketing strategy. So when we're having the discussion about titles revision, as I had with Kurniawati, it's quite good to try and get that bedded down as soon as possible in the contract. But we also understand that during the process of the manuscript development, things will change. So again, we're not completely rigid on that score. But certainly by the time the manuscript enters production, you can't change the title. It has to be finalized. Aim to grab the reader's attention in your proposal. Again, your synopsis is so important. I have a bit of a peeve, what do you call it? Yeah, one of my peeves is when I get a proposal that only has like 3 lines about the book. This is your chance to really like show what your book is setting out to achieve and what it's going to contribute. So obviously you don't need to write pages and pages, but a good 400 word synopsis, 500 word synopsis is really, is really your chance to show how your book is going to shine. Focus on answering the following questions. What is the book about? How is it distinctive? What does it offer that other books don't? And what needs does it satisfy within the markets and the literature? Don't assume specialist subject knowledge on the part of the editor, please. Again, I mentioned the 3-minute thesis competition. You've also got to consider that your work might be read by someone that's not in the same discipline as you. Okay, so maybe you're working in a particular area of sociology that might be of interest to someone in area studies or anthropology. So also consider that breadth, that there may be things that are really obvious to you, and if you're doing a thesis, to your thesis examiners, you're showing a mastery of that particular field. But in the case of a, excuse me, in the case of a monograph or edited volume, you also need to assume that people outside of your discipline may be reading it. So don't assume specialist subject knowledge or very definitive subject knowledge always of your reader or of your editor, because I work across the humanities and social sciences. So it's also really good when you're having a conversation about your book to also just talk in terms that, you know, as if you're talking to a general wider readership, even though of course we do appreciate that you're going to be deep diving into the research itself. Okay, table of contents I've touched on already. Don't ever restate the chapter outline of your thesis or research report, outline the content of your monograph. This is, again, we're talking more about edited volumes today, but in the cases of monographs, we do not publish dissertations, but we do publish monographs off the back of doctoral work. So I just have to emphasize that if it's a monograph stemming from doctoral work or from a dissertation, substantial rewriting needs to happen. It's got to be completely redone, restructured. And I get proposals that say this thesis will do that, or this dissertation shall do this. And it's just not good practice. Sorry. Do look at the market from the publisher's perspective. I've mentioned, make it clear how your proposal relates to competing books, provide evidence of the interest in your field, and include academic and professional associations. Do include existing books from the publisher. I've mentioned that already. Never ever write there's no competition. It may be that your book is tackling an aspect of a topic that hasn't been done before, but showing an awareness of that work that has informed your book and informed your research is also a way of demonstrating that there is a real market for your book. So in saying that, oh, well, these books are there, but they don't cover any of the same territory that mine does, is also a way of showing the market for your work. Don't assume that a general audience will be interested in your proposed book. So what I mentioned earlier is like, you know, you need to be able to explain what the aims of the work are to someone that's maybe not specifically from your field. But at the same time, you don't want to assume that every single person within undergraduate students, laymen, policymakers, graduate students, and researchers are going to be reading it. It's most likely going to be researchers in the case of Springer edited volumes and monographs. Be realistic about your submission date and your expected word count. Again, your timetable. As an edited volume, that's why it's quite difficult, is you've got many different people coming together, all with different responsibilities and commitments. So be generous with your time because it is a lot of work. Show awareness of copyrights and permissions. Third-party material needs to be cleared by the authors ahead of submitting the manuscript. So if you're including photographs or tables from other publications, etc., please make sure you get those permissions before you submit. Do suggest reviewers who know your subject and anticipated markets, particularly if your research is going to appeal to a specific geographic region. As I said, we do invite authors and volume editors to submit up to 10 reviewer recommendations who should never be close colleagues or PhD supervisors or examiners, and ideally they should not even be from their same institution. I always suggest recommending reviewers who you admire in terms of their scholarly work, because even though the criticism might be a bit harsher, that criticism is most likely going to, well, hopefully constructive and help the improvement of the chapter and of or of the monograph. I'm not going to focus on PhDs because I don't think we have any PhDs here. But if someone is interested in revisiting their dissertation to rework it into a monograph, you can drop me an email and I can send you a guide on how to do that. I'm almost done with time, so I'm just going to quickly touch on two publishing models, the two publishing models that we work within. We have an open access. Oh, my door just opened. Sorry. Sorry about that. No problem. the joys of working from home. At least it wasn't my dog barking. So yes, we have two models: open access publishing and non-open access publishing. The common question I get is how much it costs to publish. We don't charge authors or editors anything when it comes to publishing a book with Springer. There's one exception to that, and that is if you need copy editing, substantial copy editing. Within Springer's production, they do a basic copy edit for grammar, punctuation, referencing, etc. But if you are really struggling to write in English, I always recommend pursuing the services of an external editor, which you would need to do at your own cost. We also have open access books, whereby a fee is paid, a book processing charge. This enables the book to be made available for free online in the public domain under a CC BY license, and also for the print book to then be sold at a cost, basically at a cheaper price. There's a flat fee that is paid, and this enables the book to be published OA. So the majority of the books I've published from Bryn have been non-open access books, which means they obviously go into the ebook collections I mentioned at the beginning, and the library or the institute pays the subscription fee to access that collection. In the case of open access books, they do not fall under the ebook subscription model because they are made freely available in the public domain. So I also wanted to touch on the fact that Indonesia is actually one of the leading open access publishers, certainly in terms of journal articles, in the region. So it's also good to talk to your institute, or if you are funded, say you're funded by someone like the European Commission. The European Commission has an open access mandate built into their funding, so that any book that is published of research that they fund has an open access allowance. There's an expectation that it will be published OA. So I won't go into great detail on that, but essentially the process of publishing an open access book is exactly the same. There's no difference. The difference is the licensing in terms of the access. Universitas of Indonesia has done a few open access books. There is a reason for it, and if I can just back up a few slides, it's because it increases the number of citations, and it really boosts downloads, because that's ultimately how we're measuring a book's performance. It's in downloads and citations. 7 times more downloads, 50% more citations on average for open access books. So something to consider. And again, it's the same process. The contracting process is slightly different. It's all right. So lastly, just to say that, yeah, the open access contract is slightly different. You have your edited volume contract, which is signed by the volume editors. I want to add quickly something about contracting when it comes to edited volume. The volume editor, as Kurniawati now also knows, is signed by the volume editor. The authors do not have to sign the contract, but they sign a consent to publish form ahead of the book going into production. It's basically like a sort of subcontract for the authors to say, I've cleared the necessary permissions and given Springer my go ahead to publish my work. So only the volume editor signs a contract. In the case of open access books, there are 2 agreements: that which the volume editor signs and that which the funder signs. So the funder is liable for the payment of the book processing charge to make the book open access, but we realized that often editors and authors weren't very comfortable signing a contract which had those terms included when they weren't the ones actually paying the funding, the fee. So now the funder signs a separate agreement that makes them liable for the open access costs. Again, I'm going to just end here just to say that we try and support our authors as far as possible. In the case of working with Bryn Press acts as an intermediary, and I will send the peer review reports to Novia, who's the editor at Bryn Press, and she will then facilitate that feedback and the revision schedule, etc., with the authors and the editors. So we very much work as a team in that way. In the case of standalone books that are submitted to Springer, yeah, I'm really happy to answer any questions, and yeah, any questions at all in terms of the process or the structure of proposals. More than happy to also provide notes on the proposals that you put forward to today to highlight the strong points and the potential weak points ahead of sending it out to review. I've touched on citation and indexing and said that we send all our books out to Scopus, Web of Science, etc. But our key USP is the fact that we have worldwide distribution, and we have partners with, say, Springer Link is our main platform, which has millions of downloads per year. And we also partnered with, say, Amazon and Google Books, etc., to make sure that your book is available for sale to as wide a network as possible. Again, emphasizing ebooks. Yeah, this is a sort of paper subscription model in terms of books availability versus the online database model, and you can see why digitization has been so important to us in our publishing model strategy. We also have something called My Springer, which is basically an account through which the e-proofing and access to the book is facilitated, and everything is done through e-proofing now. So once the book goes into production editor will be in touch with you. Again, just to distinguish between the different editorial roles, I'm the commissioning editor or acquisitions editor. And then we've also got production editors who are the ones who help with the typesetting, the copy editing, etc. And then we also work with a team of editorial assistants who would do a lot of the administration in terms of processing your complementary copies, payments, etc. English language editing. There is an English language editing service that Springer works with, American journal experts, but this again is at an additional cost. So this is for substantial editing, as I mentioned. So if you don't want to work with your own copy editor or a freelance copy editor, I can also refer you to that copy editing service. And that's all. I ran slightly over time there, but I hope I've given you a sort of broad overview of the Springer publishing process and what we're looking for in books. And again, I'm looking forward to seeing the edited volume proposals that you put together, and happy to answer any questions. I thought at this point, and Najib, if I may, I'll just quickly open the proposal form just to quickly show you it. Let me quickly open that. Just give me 1 second. Okay, new share. Right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Oh, and I see Konati's message. Gender and politics in post-Reformasi Indonesia, women leaders within local oligarchy networks. Beautiful search engine optimization proof. So fantastic. Thanks, Konati. Here's the book proposal form, which I sent to you today. And together with your table of contents, as I mentioned, you will need to complete this form to submit. Actually, Springer's moved on to an online proposal system now. But usually I would need to have, need to have a tentative title as well as the details of all the volume editors or authors in order to generate that form to send out. So I thought for the purposes of today, better to just use it in Word format. So I've highlighted at the top, in the top block there, what the supporting documents which we'll need to evaluate the proposal. And again, I really just want to emphasize again, the table of contents is the most important aspect of that today. The title and subtitle, again, there's short guidelines underneath each section in terms of what you need to do, authors and editors' names, academic and professional affiliations, addresses, or that kind of metadata. New material previously published or translation, pretty straightforward. Again, previously published, you would need to include any previously published work and the publisher, and also outline that you will have the permission to feature that work. Type of work, monograph or contributive volume in today's case. Estimated number of pages, we work on 525 words per page. I would expect, again, like I say, 6,000 to 7,000 words minimum per chapter. Estimated number of tables and images, if any, what your completed manuscript is going to contain. Are you going to have a preface? Are you going to invite a foreword from an external scholar? Always recommended. The main subject areas for your book, the target audience for your book or the readership, competition from publishers, as I've mentioned, related Springer or Springer Nature titles, Google keywords, your bios, your back cover text. I've put 250 words here. You can actually write a little bit longer and then I can always help edit it down. So anywhere between 250 to 500 words, I'd say is fine. 3 unique selling points, really important. What these 3 unique selling points, firstly, are very important for our marketing and sales team, and they're also featured on the book's homepage when the book is published. So yeah, it needs to be, this book is this is the first book to cover. It's the only book dealing with this topic. It brings together a group of top scholars. You can also emphasize the fact that these are Indonesian experts from Indonesia, working on Indonesia. So yeah, anything that you think makes the book really unique can be listed there. Your publishing model, preferred publishing model. So again, I've mentioned open access versus non-open access. You can also say, I'm not required to publish open access, but you want to explore it further, in which case we can have that discussion. And then we have a reviewer's recommendations list at the end. So that allows you to recommend the reviewers that you think would, we could possibly approach to send your proposal to. So hopefully I can now take some questions, and thanks everyone for listening. And again, if we'd like to do a follow-up workshop next year, and perhaps do a bit of more of a deep dive, or perhaps possibly partner with some other institutes or the co-publishing partners, I think that would be something we could look at working on for next year. So thanks very much, and happy to answer any questions at this point.
Thank you, Alex.
No problem.
I think there is an echo.
There is a bit of an echo, yeah.
Hello. Yeah, hello. Is it? I think still echoing, no?
Little bit, but not as bad. It's a bit clearer now.
Okay. I think we heard from you a detailed information, and including the process of publication. It's not only brief information, but it's very detailed. Actually, I was very optimistic that we can, in 2 days, I think. I don't know whether that is too optimistic, but I was very sure that we can finish a few proposals in 2 days meeting, and after getting information from you this morning, because as I understand that each of the people that come here, actually coordinator or someone who are responsible, for instance, with a certain topic in their research group. So that's why I was very optimistic, and I hope we can submit a few proposals, and you can read them in a few days, if not tomorrow. But it seems this one is a bit different from our plan. The reality right now, I mean, only I think health that come up in one place. So I'm not sure how to do this one after this. I mean, to write the proposal and finishing in 1 day or 2 days. But if not, as you suggested, perhaps we will arrange again. We will arrange again to have a meeting more well prepared, and either this year or next year, and we will write the proposal more detail and ready to be reviewed and something like that. But regarding your presentation, Alex, before any question from the participant, actually I have a question. For instance, that you mentioned that there are 3 kinds of publication from Springer. POD, print on demand, and ebook, and then the last one is a print book and something like that, right? If that, and then there is also if I'm not mistaken, there is one publication from Brin last year, this year, Spring Brief, edited by Maxentius Trisambodo, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct? Yeah. And then one question that I would like to raise is regarding building on a body of existing literature, like journal. So is it possible, for instance, to collect several articles that have been, for instance, published by journal, and then collect them, edit them into one edited volume?
No.
Of course, no?
No,
Okay.
no. Najib, yeah, sorry, I'm gonna.
And now I think I would like to invite any question from participants. But before that one, is it possible for us to get your PowerPoint presentation, Alex?
Sure, Najib, no problem. I'm also, I need to be rude for 1 second because I need to quickly plug my laptop in before I take further questions. Please give me 1 minute.
Okay.
My charge is on the bed. 1 second.
Gimana kan pertanyaannya Nia? Sama satu related to your nomor 2 itu proses. Apa bisa dikirim langsung ke Springer atau harus
Ya, itu yang kita pengenkan justru kirim langsung.
Tapi nggak ada nota sama Brin.
Sorry about that. I realized my laptop was at risk of battery dying. Yes, PowerPoint presentation, no problem. I can share that. And if I may, Najib, also want to. I see there's a question in the chat box. Possible to send a book proposal someday next year because we need to get them on doctor. Absolutely. I just want to say from this session today, I think it's fantastic that everyone's coming together and is going to have the opportunity to work on the table of contents. But I really urge you to take as much time as you need and reflect on hopefully some of the tips I've given today, and take the time you need. There is really no rush. I would much rather have a really strong comprehensive proposal to send out for review than rush that process. Ideally, by the time the proposal goes out for review, it's in its best shape. So please no rush at all. Next year is absolutely fine. The book proposal can be sent to directly or through Brin Press. Excellent question. This depends whether you want to do it under the co-publishing agreement or whether you want to publish a book standalone with Springer. So I would suggest, send it to me. And if you're interested in the co-publishing option, which means that you might be able to also publish the book under Brin Press for the Indonesian market, they will possibly produce a different book cover and they will sell it within the Indonesian market. Then I think just mention that when you write to me, and then I can introduce the Brin Press editor into the conversation. And the third question I see is for Pak Najib, funding translation for English. So I'll leave that question to you, Najib, to take over.
Okay. Well, we are still trying to find that kind of fund for the translation into English, but hopefully that fund will be available. If not this year, then next year. But as I mentioned at the beginning, that this kind of communication, this kind of workshop is prepared, for instance, to what you call it, like to make a shortcut process, not through green press, but directly, for instance, as you mentioned, as a standalone proposal. But if then that book will be connected with WinPress, that's fine. But we would like not what you call it, like a passive participant in the collaboration between Green Press and Springer, but we want to like making our own proposal to be submitted and then selected, and then after that, if that to be included in the frame of the collaboration, that will be fine.
Great.
And I think there is another question from Dina.
Okay. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Tina. Hi.
I have two questions for you. Based on your experience, my first question is about consents. Suppose some research involved or funded, for example, by other institutions or any stakeholders who kind of required legally to give consent if the researcher publish their writing. In what stage usually Springer will ask that consent, and is there any kind of specific form for the researcher to submit to Springer, or it is from the researcher himself who provided? My second question is related to the language. Some of us are lucky to have international encounter to publish their work in the international publisher, but some of us still kind of find it new to write and publish their work with international company like Springer's. Do you have any advice for us about the writing? Secondly, you mentioned slightly about the copy editing from Springer, but before that, I think we necessary to have a proofreader to check our writing. Usually, is it from us who must do that, or it can be done in Springer? So that's my question. Thank you.
Thanks, Tina. Good questions. Very good questions. I'll speak to the first point, which was permissions. Permissions clearance is, well, it's on the onus of the author. So you would need to do the required permissions clearance on your side. We can give you a form to help that process, but essentially in the contract or in the consent to publish form within edited volumes, that is stated that when you sign that, you say, I have done the necessary permissions clearance. So it would need to be cleared. I always say the earlier the better. So perhaps before your contract is even signed, you should probably check that you can get the permissions. But certainly by the time that manuscript has been peer reviewed and it's the final document and it's going into production, they want to make sure that all the permissions have been cleared. And we have permissions forms for third-party clearance or anything like that, third-party material clearance that we can provide to you. So we don't mandate that we have to have that specific form, but you need to guarantee to us that there are not going to be any issues when it comes to copyright, third-party material, clearing research for funder with your funder for publication, etc. Basically, we're just asking you to sign off on that process being concluded before the book goes into publication. The second point was related to tips for first time publishing with international presses. And I think that really actually ties into the conversation about the, say, Brun Press relationship. I think that if you're finding language writing in English a particular challenge, it can be very helpful in that case to consider the co-publishing partnership because of the support that Brun Press will provide. They're obviously aiming to support researchers from within Brun, and they do a lot in terms of the additional copy editing on co-published publications that we're both working on. In terms of the copy editing services that Springer provides, I have to be quite frank that it's cursory editing. So basically the understanding is that by the time the manuscript's submitted, it's to a degree of English that is clear, legible and readable, although we're not expecting it to be perfect, obviously. And there will be, like I say, copy editing for language corrections and grammatical corrections. But if the writing is such that it's quite that some of the writing's murky in terms of what it's trying to convey, then I really recommend working with an external editor. I have to also say that if you decide you don't want to go through, say, the Britain Press link, and you want to just submit straight to Springer, it's actually quite good to go through. Well, you've got two options. You can either go through a freelance copy editor, or you can go through a copy editing service. I know University of Indonesia uses Inago or Inago. And I mentioned the American Journal experts, AJE, they the partner that Springer works with for copy editing, and they are copy editors from people who have masters or PhDs, so they would be familiar with scholarly writing conventions. So in terms of tips, it's let me think about that. Yeah, I think, well, if you're submitting to a journal, for example, and your first time submitting to an international journal, I think scope is absolutely critical. Choosing, I know everybody wants to focus on impact factors and indexation, etc., but you always choose a book series or a journal which is within it. The scope needs to be within your or should I say your research needs to be within that scope. I think a lot of the time submitting to journals, sometimes the paper can be of good quality, but it just doesn't meet the scope of what the journal's after. So I know Springer, when I was working with some journals, I only work with books now, we also had something called a transfer desk, where if your journal was your paper was out of scope for the journal you submitted to, you could elect to transfer and we would direct you to your paper to a different journal. So that's on the journal side of things. From book publishing, I am aware that one of the greatest challenges for Indonesian scholars is language. And this is not specific to Indonesian scholars, actually. I mean, even in our European offices, people writing coming from Italy or the Netherlands, where English is not perhaps the mother tongue, it is a challenge. And that's why I think if there's any way to get support by, say, publishing within the Britain Press Springer publishing environment to sort of nurture the book on its way to publication by offering that additional support. And that's why we've created these kinds of partnerships, is that you're then working with the Britain Press editor who's native in Bahasa Indonesia, but fully bilingual with English. So she's also going to have that, well, she's also going to be able to offer that additional support in communicating with you in Bahasa and in English, and to kind of act as a sort of go-between between the two publications. So did I miss anything there?
No.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you, Mbak Tina and Alex. I would like to invite other people to ask, or if not, actually, that is there any question from Lydia or from Atika? Mas Arifin?
I see Kanisa's here as well. She's about to sign a contract on ASEAN maritime security. Kanisa, your contract's almost ready, I promise.
Actually, another purpose why we like invite you here, Alex, and also we try to connect with Springer, is what you call it, like following the process. It is easier for us, for instance, if one of the book already accepted at Springer, for instance, the process will be, if I'm not mistaken, will be guided, right? The timeline and also the what you call it, like reminder also coming from Springer for us, that make us, for instance, in the management, it would be easier. It's like shifting the responsibility, instead of us like reminding for our researcher to submit again and then the review again, then it will be move into Springer to do that. And if we have, for instance, 10 proposal, that would be, we expect, for instance, we can publish at least, for instance, 5 or 7 from quickly, for instance, from the proposal that accepted by Springer. Any question? Any more question regarding the process or editorial assistant, and something about the timing, and also anything else?
Just do one more point to what you've just said.
Katrina?
Any more questions? I just wanted to add one thing
Pertanyaan.
on that score, and that's to say, you know, I would rather have less proposals but quality proposals as well. So I think it's also, for example, if you're giving me 10 proposals and maybe 2 of them are in an area of public health, it's also, yeah, I mean, I also think of connectivity between the different topics you're working on. And we also publish a lot of interdisciplinary work, multidisciplinary work. So even if you're coming from, you know, different schools, but you're working on topics relating to environmentalism or climate change, maybe from a sociological point of view or from a scientific point of view, or in terms of economics, you know, I also wanted to just add that, yeah, interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary volumes are also welcome, providing there is that that connectivity that I spoke about earlier. So something to think about.
Actually, I have a question, Alex. That one is you mentioned in your PowerPoint that it could be around 70,000 words until 100,000 words. If I'm not mistaken, that one is around 100 pages. It's not the really thick book, right?
That's longer.
And
about 100,000 words is about 200 pages. Yeah, it's about 200 pages.
Can you repeat again, because just now we didn't hear.
Oh, sure. Let me just do a quick I'll do a quick calculation for you, Pak Najib. It's so 525. Let me see, 60,000 divided by 25. Yeah, so the shortest book that we would publish as an edited volume would be 150 pages. So that's why I said earlier about 75,000 words actually on the shorter end, to 110,000, 120,000 would be on the longer end, 200 and 220 pages. But I should also add that there is no word limits. So yeah, we don't have a cap, but we do have a minimum. So I would certainly, I would aim for, let's just do some maths here. If you're looking to do an EV, let's say, 8,000 words per chapter, 10 chapters, 80,000 words, plus preface, plus forward, takes you up to maybe 85,000 words. So that's probably a good guideline. 8,000 words a chapter, 10 chapters is pretty good.
So the one that related to the Springer brief that you mentioned previously, you said that you are no longer publishing that kind of book, or?
We are, Pak Najib. I mean, we are still publishing them. It's just that because they don't perform as well. If I get a proposal for a brief that is 50,000 words, I'm more likely to say to the scholar, is there a possibility to expand it? You know, can you tack on another 20,000 words and expand this, because the standalone long form books tend to have higher readership. That's not to say though that we don't publish the briefs. We've just been, I think, a lot more selective now on the brief proposals that we get, because it's not, within my list, I'm not looking to publish so many short form books. But you could still propose a Springer brief, but again, if you're somewhere between the brief word counts and a normal standard monograph word counts, I would encourage the development for a longer form text.
Okay, and then another one is regarding the major reference book. I think that's quite interesting. I mean, that's become what you call it, like usually become a classic book, right?
Yeah.
Become
They're
major book.
bestsellers. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sure, but if we can have that one, I think that would be good and would be useful in terms of giving reference to academic community. For instance, on certain issues, for instance, on let's say marginal communities in Indonesia or something like that.
Yeah, I think with reference works, there are huge undertakings. The most important criteria in an editor-in-chief for a reference work is network. The person who takes the helm, or sometimes two editors, who takes the helm of a reference work really needs to have an expansive international network and the ability to pull in 50 plus contributors. That's the minimum, right? Because you're looking at 1,000 pages. So that's what we're really looking for, is somebody who's, top of their field, full professor or professor emeritus, 30 years and a publication record that's longer than a laundry list in my house. So I think that's really important. And also reference works tend to, compared to just your standard edited volume, breadth. So public health, public and community health in Southeast Asia. And then you're inviting, the leading scholars from within that geography, within that field, that are, and they're looking at different areas of public health, right, or community health. So just important to think of, I forget what you mentioned earlier, but marginalized communities in Indonesia. I would actually suggest saying, let's expand it and say marginalization and marginalized communities in Southeast Asia. And then you would also appoint section editors within a major reference work. So you would have the EIC, or editor-in-chiefs, and then you would have the section editor. So maybe you want to do marginalized communities in Indonesia, in Vietnam, in Thailand, and then elect section editors to oversee each section. In the case of reference works as well, they can be published in print terms. There are such large works like encyclopedias that in print terms they will be published in separate volumes. But we are again thinking in ebook terms. We're looking at that whole, it's almost like a collection, isn't it? A reference work. So certainly encourage reference work proposals, but be aware that it is a huge project, and it's always, I think, I actually advise having two editor-in-chiefs for reference works, because we have a development editor assigned to those projects that they work with, the peer review. We have an excellent system which we call a Meteor, which allows us to track the peer review of each chapter as and when it's reviewed and approved and published online first. And then, reference works have a lot of support, but again, at least 50 international contributors, it would be the requirement. So just something to think about.
Thank you, Alex.
Yep.
Here we have another question from Lydia.
Hi, Lydia. If you already have a book published by another national publisher, not Libby Press, is that possible to publish again with Springer? And how about copyright permissions? Excellent question. So Lydia, if you published with Obor or UGM Press, then which publisher was it?
Obor.
Obor, easy. Obor is a co-publishing partner with us. So what I would do is go to Ibu Kartini, I'm guessing you're working with there, write to her, mention that you're interested in doing a co-publication between Obor and Springer, and then we can go from there.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank goodness it's with Obor, actually, because it makes the copyright issue much easier. So is it in English, or is it Bahasa for translation?
It's still in Bahasa.
Okay. Well, certainly talk to Andre and Ibu Kartini, drop them a message, and we can discuss it further. That sounds great.
Okay, thank you, Alex.
Sure.
So besides Obor and Libby Press, what else? The collaboration between Springer and Indonesian publishers. Is it include penerbit buku Kompas and Gramedia?
No, we're not working with them. We're working with UGM, University Gajah Mada Press, and we did work with Rosda previously, but not anymore, and that was due with like translation difficulties. But also, we were in discussion with the University of Erlanga Press as well, but that hasn't. There's nothing in place there, but we had been in discussion with them as well. Again, actually. Talking outside of, and I think this is a really important point to touch on, if we're talking about co-publishing or publishing a book that's published with another press that isn't one of our co-publishing partners, then what would need to happen is, well, firstly, if it's in English already, yeah, we would be less likely to consider it because it's outside of a co-publishing partnership arrangement. But if it's in Bahasa and you're wanting to do the translation, the first step would be to talk to that publisher and to see if, well, firstly, check your contract to see if you have the rights to languages outside of the Bahasa language edition, or you would write to them and ask for the permission to take your English language translation elsewhere. So they would need to give you that clearance. We consider works that are translations of existing publications in other languages, whether it's Mandarin or French or Bahasa Indonesia. We consider translations new works because they're now available to a completely different audience in being translated. So from our point of view, we consider it's 100% original material. But again, you would need to just get the permission from the original Bahasa Indonesia publisher.
Okay, thank you, Alex. So if this one another question that I have in mind, what is that? The role of editor. You mentioned that what you call it, like the role of editor is very important, like in binding together the articles of the edited volume, and also perhaps what you call it, like managing the proposal. And sometimes the weakness of us, I mean, of course, again, in the context of English, that one. And if we are following the step taken by FIBUI, by Katie, for instance, they try to combine to include like foreign scholar as part of the editor of the volume.
Yeah.
Is it possible, for instance? I don't know. Well, of course, that's based on our network, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know whether Springer can provide any help in that context or not.
I also want to place emphasis on, again, it's really about the work itself, right? So as you know, Lydia knows, and Kanisa knows, and Kurniawati knows, I mean, we're publishing work that's exclusively published and led by Indonesian scholars. So it's not essential. In the case of the UI edited volumes that they were doing, we just felt because all the contributors were coming from one institution, we felt that it was quite important to have an external contributor involved in some capacity, which is why we recommended, okay, you have the University of Indonesia editor partnering with an international scholar to nurture this these new contributors coming, in their writing. It also obviously helps to have an experienced scholar, involved. But again, I'm not pernickety about that as a specific requirement. So I think if you're looking to say have Springer support in soliciting contributions, we can try help with that, and that's why series are actually often a logical outlet in that case, because let's say you put forward an edited volume proposal, we put it to a specific series, the series then has the leverage to say, oh, this is excellent. Okay, we've got a table of contents with 6 solid contributing chapters, but this needs extra meat on its bones. We need to invite some new contributors. Maybe we want to invite an additional editor. And then we can go to the series and say, could you put out a call for chapters? This is the outline, this is the synopsis, and they can also help in soliciting new contributors if they feel that this edited volume proposal is going to be a strong fit for their series. So there are ways around it. The other thing to do, of course, social media magic. You know, you've got a concept, you share the synopsis even before the proposals come to Springer or to another publisher, to say this is a proposal we're working on, and approach at a conference. You know, if you're a volume editor, again, much easier when it's in person than virtually, but you know, having discussions around the tea table and you know, you have this concept for the volume, you can say we're looking to, you know, invite contributors. But yeah, certainly we can, particularly if a book is already contracted, we can do calls for contributors or calls for contributions for existing proposals. Yeah, but again, really, that's why I said the onus is on the volume editor. Is a really important role in terms of having the vision for how that edited volume is all going to come together, and where the gaps are. So that's why I think when it goes out for review, they often identify, look, it'd be really great if we could add a chapter on this. Or, you know, maybe we haven't considered addressing this particular dimension, or, you know, we're doing a book that's focused on Southeast Asia, but, you know, Thailand's been left out of the conversation. It would be good to invite a chapter on Thailand. Yeah, those kind of tips I think can be really helpful. Kanisa's been through the review process quite recently of her book, and yeah, it's, well, done some of the revisions, and then the manuscript has to go out to another review, and hopefully, well, from what I've seen in the terms of the revisions timetable, a lot of you can't always implement every single recommendation that a review is going to make, but I think certainly the review of the manuscript has helped get the new edition to a more current place, because I think some of the criticisms were that, like, some of the data was a little bit outdated since the original publication of the Lippi edition, and then, you know, make some suggestions for updates to the text, or include a bit more recent scholarship that has come out in the last 2 to 3 years. So those are often the kind of recommendations as well that reviewers will give. You know, you haven't considered this recent publication in the literature review, things like that. So yeah, but to your point, Pak Najib, about Springer support, again, like I say, we can help with calls for chapters. I can also help if a book is contracted. I can also send out a flyer to say, this book, here is planned, these are the editors, this is the concept, and then you as the volume editor, or whoever the volume editors are, can send that flyer out far and wide to your network, and then hopefully get some chapter proposals in that way. So we can certainly help with that. But again, that only usually would happen then after the book is already contracted, if you're looking to invite further contributing chapters.
I think that's very helpful. I mean, in terms of soliciting article from contributor, right?
Yeah. Phones.
Nggak usah disambung kayaknya, yeah. Before ending your session, I think I would like to ask that one that I'm still confused with your presentation. Building on a body of existing literature,
yes.
journal article. What does it mean? I was thinking that we can collect several articles that already published in the journal and then make them into edited volume.
Yeah, no, I'm afraid, Najib, you see, there's a simple reason for that, and that is that it would completely eclipse the sales and readership of that article as it already exists. It's not offering anything new. You know, if you want to read that particular paper, you know, now you've got a split between, oh, well, do I need to buy it or read it through the Springer book, or do I need to read it through the Journal of Asian Development Studies? And the Journal of Asian Development Studies, which might be run by Elsevier or Taylor and Francis or whatever, they're not going to want to give us the rights to that work, because why would they? They've worked on it, they've nurtured it, they've edited it, they've typeset it, and it's part of their portfolio. So At the same time, it's hard to make a case for an edited volume, which is a compilation of work that's already out there that somebody can already access through their library database. So that's why I said, we're not totally rigid in that on that score, meaning particularly for monographs, not edited volumes, but in monographs, when you have published 2 papers in journals following your dissertation, and now you want to rework that dissertation into a monograph, we understand that those 2 articles might be really key to the structure of your monograph. And so we're not going to be overly rigid there if the journal is going to give permission to the author to put that article in their book. But yeah, I'm afraid I don't mean to take a sledgehammer to a concept on an edited volume that might involve putting together published work. But I would certainly say that it's not to say that you can't include a chapter that is building from that journal article, but it really should constitute an entirely new work and then cite back to the journal publication that's already in existence.
Okay. Okay. Any more question? I think we almost no. Is it possible, Alex, to share the PowerPoint here or through email?
I think I'll do it through email if that's all right, Najib. I'll just PDF it and then I'll send it across to you. And then you can share it. What I'll do is I'll send some supporting documents as well. So I can send the search engine optimization guide. I can send the revising the dissertation guidelines for anybody that's looking to revise the doctoral work. And yeah, hopefully that will also be helpful to everybody.
Okay, then thank you very much, Alex, for your presentation and also spending time with us. I hope we can have a few proposals within these few days, and that we can submit them to you, or hopefully we can have another meeting with more people and more proposal that will be submitted also to Springer. And like I mentioned previously, we haven't invited, for instance, some researcher that just graduated from several universities, that perhaps they can submit their dissertation or a thesis to Springer as a monograph, not as an edited volume.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, they'll need to do quite a lot of, as I mentioned, quite a lot of rewriting though ahead of doing that. I'd also like to say that I think what's going to be a plan owing to your objectives for this workshop is prepare a proposal form, pay particular attention to the synopsis and a very general sketch of the TOC at this early stage. So yeah, I mean, I do think that in 2 days to really finalize a table of contents might be quite difficult. So yeah, I would just say focus on the synopsis, the marketing text section, and then a sketch of the table of contents as it will unfold with the contributor's name under each chapter. That would be very helpful.
Okay, thank you very much, Alex, and have a good day.
You too, Pak Najib. Thank you very much. Terima kasih. I haven't said that in a while. So have a good workshop, and yeah, thank you very much again for having me.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Keren nggak sama yang di sana?
Belum dibuka.
Oh, belum dibuka ya? Iya. Iya. Oh, nggak kedengeran mungkin ya. Saya ulang sebentar ya. Jadi gagasan awalnya itu adalah bahwa kita akan berkumpul di sini itu untuk kemudian katakanlah mempersiapkan sinopsis, table of content, terus beberapa hal seperti yang ada di dalam di dalam template yang sudah dikirimkan oleh Alex kayak gitu. Nah, terus kemudian jadi itu kan berarti kan kita perlu katakanlah merenungkan seperti apa kira-kira kelebihan daripada buku ini, terus kemudian seperti tadi di dalam menjawab beberapa pertanyaan-pertanyaan dan paparan-paparan yang tadi sudah disampaikan oleh Alex dan juga mengisi template-nya itu kayak gitu. Jadi ada diskusi-diskusi di antara kelompok-kelompok itu untuk mempersiapkannya. Baik itu yang terkait dengan mempersiapkan, misalnya tadi disebutkan berapa masing-masing chapter, misalnya 300 atau 200 kata dan sebagainya kayak gitu ya. Jadi ada diskusi yang terkait dengan hal tersebut. Tetapi kalau umpamanya ternyata sebagian online, sebagian offline, ini saya nggak tahu nanti polanya seperti apa mengerjakannya. Berdiskusi lewat online kayak gitu. Nah, mungkin besok ini Pak, coba mereka bekerja malam ini, besok kita buka online yang online. Maksudnya masing-masing grup ada yang terkonek sendiri karena kita nggak bisa menyediakan linknya banyak gitu. Yeah. Tapi sebenarnya bisa di backup, cuman kan ini teman-teman nggak, ternyata walaupun saya tanya mereka online itu bisa hanya sampai jam 12. Iya, iya. Agak siang juga masih ada acara gitu. Iya. Sebetulnya seperti itu, Pak. Ya. Besok mungkin bisa kita buka lagi online dari jam 9 sampai jam 11. Bisa kita menggunakan yang diusulkan Mas Zulham itu, kita nanti akan mempersiapkannya yang ada dan juga yang dari rumah barangkali nanti mungkin bisa share beberapa bagian daripada bukunya. Dan tentu saja mungkin yang terpenting itu ya, ini kan sebetulnya batch pertama kayak gitu ya, grup pertama. Yang kemarin itu awalnya kita berharap itu kalau nggak bisa hadir ya diganti dengan yang hadir kayak gitu, yang diganti nama dengan yang kira-kira bisa hadir dan kemudian mempersiapkannya kayak gitu. Nah mungkin nanti saya minta tolong Mbak Dina untuk mempersiapkan yang kira-kira kita bisa melakukan workshop untuk sambil mungkin sebelumnya juga dipersiapkan kayak gitu ya, untuk kemudian proposalnya, dan kemudian di workshop itu adalah katakanlah pematangan dan polishing dari proposalnya. Saya kurang tahu apakah bulan depan yang kira-kira pas, yang kira-kira tidak bentrok dengan jadwal dari teman-teman semuanya. Tetapi kita inginkan sebetulnya dengan proses ini kita akan mengikuti, katakanlah yang tadi saya sampaikan itu adalah guideline yang sudah ada misalnya dalam Springer. Dan itu ada agak lifting beban bagi katakanlah koordinator sebetulnya, mengurangi beban untuk katakanlah melakukan reminder kepada masing-masing tim dan sebagainya kayak gitu ya. Karena nanti sudah ada tim dari Springer yang selalu mengingatkan kapan deadline-nya, terus kapan misalnya harus submit ini, yang mengikuti alur daripada jadwal mereka itu. Dan karena itu kegiatan seperti ini menjadi sesuatu yang penting untuk katakanlah meningkatkan leverage kita dari awalnya frame-nya adalah penerbitan nasional menjadi penerbitan yang mengikuti standar yang ada di dalam model semisal Springer ini. Karena itu nanti saya kira kita perlu mengulangnya lagi dengan persiapan yang lebih matang kayak gitu ya. Dan saya tadi baru dikabari juga ternyata Bu Getty tidak bisa hadir pada siang hari ini kayak gitu. Siang termasuk nggak bisa ya Mas Zulham? Iya, ya. Awalnya kan tanggal 14 kita tunda tanggal 21. Awalnya menyebutkan bisa, jadi kita pindah tanggal 21 ini rupanya tidak bisa juga kayak gitu. Jadi ini kita perlu rearrange jadwal dan kegiatan kita pada siang hari ini kayak gitu, sehingga bisa lebih bermanfaat dan semaksimal mungkin memberikan katakanlah hasil dari kehadiran kita ada di tempat ini kayak gitu. Kalau umpamanya saya kepikiran juga kalau umpamanya tidak bisa membuat beberapa proposal, kalau umpamanya ini ada 5 atau 6 orang dan sebagainya, kita bisa saja membuat satu kayak gitu ya. Jadi bersama-sama kayak gitu membuat satu naskah yang kita ajukan. Jadi tadi misalnya dari siapa namanya dari Alex itu kan sebetulnya 1, 2, 3 kalau umpamanya itu sudah bagus dan sebagainya itu mungkin lebih baik daripada beberapa, tapi nanti mungkin mendapatkan rejection kayak gitu. Jadi karena jumlahnya sedikit, alternatif yang lain selain tetap bekerja mengikuti tim-tim, kita juga bisa mempersiapkan satu proposal atau 2 proposal yang katakanlah temanya mungkin disesuaikan dengan apa namanya teman-teman yang ada atau berdasarkan misalnya buku yang pernah kita terbitkan bersama-sama kayak gitu ya, yang dari bahasa Indonesia dan kemudian kita persiapkan dalam dimasukkan sebagai bagian daripada proposal ke Springer itu. Kira-kira gimana teman-teman semuanya? Oh ya, nanti apa namanya? Safety itu ke recordingnya coba di share kayak gitu ya, sehingga kita bisa mendengarkan lagi apa yang disampaikan oleh siapa namanya Alex tadi. Kira-kira ada usulan nggak teman-teman semuanya? Seperti apa formatnya untuk pertemuan siang hari ini? Siang sampai besok itu. Yang kira-kira kita bisa menghasilkan sesuatu, 1, 2 proposal atau tetap seperti format yang semula?
Mungkin ini Pak, saya boleh usul. Yang hadir di sini bisa kedengaran di sini.
Bisa kedengaran.
Ini yang hadir di sini mungkin ada beberapa klaster ya, kayak Putrina sama Pak Nawawi. Pak Nawawi, oh udah satu ya.
Satu klaster.
Nah ini ada Mas Rusli sama Mas Ali nih satu klaster ya.
Satu klaster.
Terus kemudian yang di sana itu siapa ya? Ada. Oh kebencanaan sama. Oh jadi satu semuanya atau berbeda satu? Oh iya, Mbak Vera.
Oh, siapa namanya?
Vera.
Vera ya? Nggak
Oke.
kelihatan kalau.
Berarti 1, 2, 3. Yang 4 ya berarti? 5 ya? Oh ada 5 Pak. Yang memang
Mas Sauman sama siapa?
sama Bu Trina.
Lydia ya?
Sama
Ada yang udah siap besok atau dia aja kok?
Siapa? Anggi Afriansa. Jadi kira-kira gimana? Mau langsung seperti semula proposal atau karena kalau umpamanya membuat 2 kemudian ini saling bersilang sepertinya juga agak berat ya gitu kan? Ya, silakan. Pakai biar kedengeran. Pakai ginian.
Saya Prof, jadi kemarin itu awalnya memang apa yang saya kan kita dari ini ya, hasil PRN gitu.
Yeah.
Namun perkembangannya itu kemarin saya dikontak oleh Mas Bayu Aji atau Bayu Aji dan dia menawarkan bagaimana kalau dari kesehatan itu kerjasama dengan klaster pendidikan dan ketenagakerjaan. Jadi akhirnya kami ngobrol terus kelihatannya ada isu-isu potensial dan payung besarnya menurut saya sangat potensial dan kemudian kami bekerja sama tentang ini apa namanya human capital development, jadi trends, issues and challenges in education, health, and employment over the half century. Itu apa namanya? Kami coba merumuskan abstrak kemarin dan sudah submit dan kami rasa itu istilahnya ini ya lebih potensial, bukan berarti kami underline jangan, tapi dalam artian lebih bisa merangkul banyak klaster seperti migrasi yang kebetulan di daerah saya barangkali kurang terakomodasi ya. Seperti itu, Prof. Jadi mungkin kita ini ya kebetulan uji juga membuat yang jadi referensi ini.
Jadi ada berapa orang kalau yang itu digabung jadi satu? Yang di sini berarti sama Puji sama Pupu berdua.
Sebenarnya secara perwakilan kami berdua, saya dari Fasilitas Pendidikan dan Mas Guru Kesehatan. Tapi di sini juga ada sebenarnya Mbak Vera dan Mas Nawawi yang juga bergabung, cuma mereka berdua juga mewakili tim yang lain gitu.
Ya, kalau siap aja.
Kalau ya saya pikir kalau umpamanya itu yang disiapkan ya, misalnya itu nanti yang kira-kira di dalam ini bisa kelihatan gambarannya lah kayak gitu. Yang dari proposal tadi mungkin go ahead aja ya, lanjutkan semisal itu kayak gitu. Dan mungkin kita akan bisa mendapatkan katakanlah satu proposal yang terkait itu kayak gitu. Kalau umpamanya nanti perlu tambahan tenaga dari saya atau Mbak Tina yang masih belum tergabung di mana-mana gitu ya, boleh juga ya untuk membuatkan proposal sinopsis dan sebagainya kayak gitu ya. Berarti satu gitu ya, yang satu tetap menjalankan itu ya dengan menggabungkan antara Puji sama Pupuh ya. Ya. Terus kemudian yang lainnya
Selamat pagi, siang, teman-teman semua. Jadi kalau saya di sini mewakili Mbak Deni dan teman-teman perencanaan. Rencana siang ini sebenarnya teman-teman reaksi dan follow up hasil dari tadi menggunakan Alex. Kalau secara topik mungkin fokus sekali ke DRR.
Apa?
Examining disaster risk reduction through social science lens. Jadi semacam kritik bahwa ilmu sosial itu belum terlalu dipakai di penanganan risiko bencana. Sebenarnya kalau dari sisi penulis, sementara masih dari dalam semua, dari teman-teman yang mengerjakan PRN. Tapi
berapa orang kira-kira?
Ada 9 judul.
Sudah banyak kan itu? Sudah cukup itu. Ya,
terus kita juga mengundang editor dari Jerman, Isabel sebagai editor, ada 3 berarti Mbak Deni, saya dan Isabel, penulis juga sudah ada 9 judul, dan kita tadi mau bertanya apakah tadi kalau misalnya kita open call dengan teman-teman lain akan lebih kuat lagi yang topiknya.
Tadi kan salah satunya yang disampaikan Alex itu ya, misalnya kalau umpamanya sudah ada proposalnya diterima dan kemudian mau open call, kan Springer juga akan membantu untuk open call-nya itu ya. Kalau umpamanya masih ada kekurangan dan sebagainya kayak gitu. Sepertinya kalau umpamanya 9 itu sudah cukup tebal ya buku ya. Kalau tadi kita menyebutkan disebutkan Alex itu sebetulnya buku-bukunya itu enggak terlalu tebal, 150 halaman dan sebagainya kayak gitu. Jadi memang nanti boleh 9 katakanlah, tetapi mungkin ada juga yang entah digabung atau di drop kayak gitu kan nanti. Ya. Berarti kita mendapatkan 2 ya, dari Pupuh terus kemudian dari Mas Yano ya.
Ini Yano yang laki-laki, kalau yang di politik Yanonya perempuan.
Ya.
Ini Yano pendatang baru di BSK.
Dari Subang, baru pulang sekolah.
Dari Subang.
Dari Subang pindah ke sini ya gitu. Berarti kita dapat 2 katakanlah ya. 2 proposal yang mungkin akan kita kerjakan. Jadi nanti siang akan bergabung teman-temannya lewat Zoom kayak gitu ya, timnya kayak gitu. Untuk mempersiapkannya kayak gitu. Sebentar. Draftnya sudah dikumpulkan kayak gitu ya. Nah, berarti yang belum ada mungkin sinopsis atau sudah ada? Berarti nanti mungkin melengkapi beberapa ini sesuai dengan apa namanya template-nya itu, dan juga nanti kita mungkin bisa share kalau umpamanya sudah dikirim oleh Alex itu beberapa hal yang tadi disampaikan di dalam PowerPoint. Nah, kalau umpamanya Septi nanti kalau umpamanya recordingnya sudah bisa apa namanya diambil, kita juga bisa nampilkan lagi, ada beberapa hal yang mungkin kita bisa dengarkan lagi kayak gitu ya. Untuk tim yang tadi mungkin tidak bisa mendengarkan secara full yang disampaikan.